Ladies and gentlemen, the show will begin momentarily. Please make your way to your seats. Again, the show will begin momentarily. Please make your way to your seats. Thank you.
Is this thing on? Good morning. Welcome to Medora, everybody. How's everybody's day going? Yeah, baby. Okay, so who here is a first-time Medora visitor? We've got, okay, that is my favorite thing to see, about half the crowd. Well, first, welcome to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. It is truly an honor to have you here for a demonstration of why we built this place. This is a world-class cultural institution in a town of 120 people in a county of 800 people in the heart of the Badlands, an oil and gas country, telling the life and legacy of perhaps our greatest American, Theodore Roosevelt, and his connection to Dakota and North Dakota and to American greatness. And we built this place to connect people with history. We have a very strong perspective here at the Theodore Roosevelt that America needs more history, not less. We need more reflection on our past to better consider the future. And this institution is only possible because of the people in this room, but because of our incredible leadership in the United States Congress, our legislative friends who are here as well in the North Dakota State Legislature, who invested in this idea when, as we were just chatting in the back, when this was just a crazy idea. So welcome to Medora. Welcome to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. We're honored to have you. We hope you get some time to spend time in the exhibits itself after this as well. But I have the great honor and privilege today of introducing Senator Kramer. And why I get to do that is because we're going to have a conversation today about the future of this country and the future of national defense and security in this country, and North Dakota's important role in this. And perhaps no other leader in the past has considered that more than Theodore Roosevelt himself. He was the first president to ever be in a car, drive a car. He was the first president to go in a submarine, to fly in a plane. It is my genuine belief that if TR was here today, he would be the first president in space. So today it's my great honor to introduce a friend of not only the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library Project, a past tourism director, and a great advocate for Western North Dakota and the importance of American history, Senator Kevin Kramer.
Thanks, Robbie. As I like to say, the most fun you can have at work. I've had a lot of great jobs, but whenever I come here, I wish I had the tourism job back. Quite honestly, it was so great. It was so fun. But Sarah's doing a way too good a job, so... Anyway, maybe someday we could switch. All of that to say thank you, Robbie, and thanks again for your hospitality as always. I will tell you, I talked to Secretary Burgum the night before last and told him that we were doing this, and he was giddy by the fact that this is what we wanted this for, to have these kinds of discussions and provide this platform and a theme that resonates and so when I first started thinking about how to use the Presidential Library, and I'd been thinking for a long time about establishing some sort of a national security forum As you know, and a lot of you, just looking around the room that I know well, know that I like bringing national security leaders to North Dakota, oftentimes to the campuses, oftentimes to the bases, sometimes to Hector Airport, just to see what and to remind them of what North Dakota's contribution to liberty is, and of course now we have this famous presidential library, and so I got to thinking. I know Doug wants to talk about conservation, which is important, of an important legacy of Roosevelt's, but so was peace through strength. And I thought, what the heck, let's do something like that. And he had, of course, one of the great lines of all time, walk softly, carry a big stick, and you will go far. And the big stick symbol is perfect for all kinds of things, not the least of which are, shall we just call them space-based interceptors. You're going to learn a little bit about that in a little bit. And so you might have noticed on the caricature coming in that a missile is the stick that we're going to talk about a little bit today, as well as some other things. I look forward to doing that. But first, I'm going to introduce the rest of the panel that will be here as we have this discussion, and then I'll make a few more opening comments in preparation for that. But I want to start out, of course, by they're going to each come in and sit down, and then we'll have them each make some comments. But I want to start out with somebody you all already know. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Without him, I wouldn't be a senator. And some of you are going, boy, John made mostly good decisions. But he is responsible as just about anybody for my being here. And if you don't know and don't remember, there was a vacancy on the North Dakota Public Service Commission. Now, I had already been serving in office, had served in an appointed office, had worked with Ed Schaefer closely for 8 years, was the state party chairman when he was elected. But John took a risk by appointing me to a vacancy on the Public Service Commission, an elected office that I then ran for and won again and again. And then took the opportunity, three of them that I lost before I took one where I won a seat in Congress to be North Dakota's only House member. And 6 years later, John Hoeven stepped into it again and pled with the majority leader to please get Kevin Cramer in this race for the Senate. And he pled with the president, you got to talk Kevin Cramer into running. And so it's his fault, is the point of it. And so you all know the former governor, the senator, my mentor, my partner. We surround the enemy pretty effectively for two guys from the middle of the North American continent. Please welcome Senator John Hoeven. You have a seat on, maybe on that end. We'll circle. Since we like to surround the enemy. We'll put the general in the middle. He's not our enemy at all. But General Guetlein is the director, the very first director, the only director, of course, of Golden Dome. Golden Dome, I think one of the reasons, the main reason I wanted General Guetlein to come out here and do this is I want to socialize the knowledge about Golden Dome. 2 years ago, there was no such thing as a Golden Dome. And in the concept that President Trump talked about, he signed an executive order referencing a early warning missile system and some sort of a missile interceptor system that could keep the continent safe. And then about a year and a half ago, the general and I, now it's not like I didn't know the general before. He was the vice chief of space operations, so we'd worked very closely on Space Force issues. But I stood in the Oval Office with Pete Hegseth and my good friend, John, thank you, Dan Sullivan, who won big last night in Alaska. Senator Sullivan and I introduced legislation, but first we stood in the Oval Office with General Guetlein when the president announced General Guetlein as the director of Golden Dome, signed the order that created Golden Dome, and I was there to back up that really smart decision of General Guetlein leading the Golden Dome effort. That was January of last year, General. It seems like it was last week sometimes. Sure. And then a few months later, Senator Sullivan and I introduced the legislation into the National Defense Authorization Act. And it was not wildly popular at the beginning, but it was clearly understood before long why this is necessary. And so thank you, General, for being here. And last and certainly not least, one of my favorite people in the whole world, Sarah Monero, is a space expert. And If you don't mind, Senator, in general, I might take a little more time even talking about Sarah before I give her the microphone, because it's always dangerous to give somebody the microphone before you butter them up. But in this case, it's really easy. So going back a little bit in the history of the formation of the Space Force, and the reason I bring this up is because it's part of what unites all of us up here. Even though General Guetlein oversees, all of the forces, if you will, answers directly to the Secretary of War in the Golden Dome effort. The reality is that Golden Dome has a lot of space components, and he's, of course, a guardian, so that's important. But long before it was cool to have a Space Force, Sarah was working for the House of Representatives on the House Armed Services Committee. You can correct me later if you want, Sarah, but she was the staff director for one of the subcommittees, a subcommittee that I serve on now in the Senate Armed Services Committee, and that is strategic forces. Strategic forces oversees, of course, our missiles. It oversees the nuclear system, nuclear triad, and most importantly, and keeping in mind that ICBM missiles were really the precursor to much of what we're talking about now. And the space component was obvious. In fact, Space Command came out of strategic forces. She was leading that charge to create a Space Force and Space Command under Mac Thornberry. Senator Hoban knows Mac well. I know Mac well. I served with him for 6 years. I always loved seeing Mac and learning from him at places like the Reagan Defense Forum when we're there together, and he's still doing great work. But she, long before it was cool, was creating, almost literally in formation, the Space Force. It wasn't until a rural electric lineman's son from Kindred got to the United States Senate and was the junior guy on the Armed Services Committee when the White House called and said, it's time to set up a Space Force, and no one else has the guts to do it, would you? And it almost went that basic. And I got 14 of my closest friends to agree on 3 amendments to the NDAA. One of the toughest ones was the chairman, but now they're all for it. Let's put it that way, now they're all for it. So Sarah's been a part of that in my world for a very long time. But she's a prestigious space advocate and thinker. In fact, she is the senior associate for the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Doesn't that sound impressive? But she's had a lot of these nerdy positions because everyone wants her. They want her because she's got a big brain. She's extremely articulate. You never have to read her, if you know what I mean. It's like, okay, thank you for that advice. And it's so refreshing, you guys. In a place where we work, where beating around the bush is like an art form, where not answering a question with an eloquent non-answer is like somehow meritorious. To have somebody just tells it straight up is glorious. It's one of my favorite things about her. Until you get to really know her, then there's so many other things. She's an incredible, well-known artist. She is a musician. She embraces all there is to life and then some. Her and Roosevelt would have gotten along very, very well. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's a super mom. She's a super wife. And she's got a lot of other great qualities like guts, grit, candor, as I said earlier, and a really, really big heart. And she's really one of the coolest people I know. So Sarah, thank you for being our moderator today. But it just seemed like speak softly and carry a big stick was a great theme for a discussion. Golden Dome, I think, is a great first in the series. The concept of a dome, the concept of a series of layers, if you will, of protections of the mainland, of the continental United States, as well as Alaska and Hawaii, seems logical to most people that want to defend freedom. While mutually destructive annihilation is a pretty good deterrent, it requires rational players around the world, and we know not every one of them is rational. Some of them are eager to be irrational with a nuclear weapon, for example. And so having a defensive piece of that makes all the sense in the world. It's reasonable, it's measured, and yet the adversaries call it accelerating. They call it escalating. And as we go through the discussion, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that from a policy standpoint. But the other thing, folks, and a lot of you know this, but some of you may not, that North Dakota's history, North Dakota's military history is rich in this area. That in the early 70s, when they built that pyramid that I don't know what it does anymore at Nakoma that we all take pictures of when we drive by it, that was part of an operation that was the beginning of what we're experiencing today. And it had missiles, nuclear-tipped missiles. The whole project was, it's called Safeguard. And so I had the Spartan missiles and Spirit missiles. In general, I don't know, they tell us they're not there anymore.
They're not there.
But there's some of us that keep hoping maybe they just are telling us that. I don't know. I've been in the skiff a lot of times, John. I don't know if you've ever been able to verify that they're still there. But anyway, That's our history. But and of course, it was very shortly after that it had to be shut down. Congress decommissioned it because of the ABM treaties and the limitations of funding. And so while some of the infrastructure's out there, that's lost. But the radar station, there's now Space Force radar at Cavalier, maintains vigilance over the much of space and the skies, and it still operates as an early missile warning system. And by the way, it was when I knew for sure that Mike Guetlein was for real. When he visited Grand Forks, visited the University of North Dakota, and here I see him. We're going to have a little meeting later about their program that they have together. But when we went up to Cavalier, and he had a number of companies there to demonstrate how this multi-generations old Parks radar, how important it is and how relevant it is to this day, and how, I don't want to say easily, but how capable it can be with modern technologies. And so it was great that you did that, General, and you made a believer out of me, and here you are back to North Dakota, and I know you're coming back again, and probably several times, perhaps, if we're lucky enough, and one day you'll be able to spend more time in Medora, because quite honestly, he just took this wonderful head tour guide led tour of the library, and we're all kind of going, it's too bad we have to go to work now, because we have like 3 more hours of stuff to do here. But with that, just thank you all for being here. And again, back to the coolest woman in Washington, D.C., if not the country. I'm turning the microphone over now to a more rational leader. Sarah Monero, thank you for being here. You're a rock star. Let's have John open up.
I mean, that's a big build-up. First of all, let me say thank you to the library for having us here, for the senators for being here, for General Guetlein for being here, for everybody that's here in the audience and online. Let me also just give a sincere note of gratitude to the 5 nations, the 5 tribal nations that call North Dakota their home, upon which land we now all sit. Mm-hmm. When Senator Kramer asked me to come out and help moderate the first Carry a Big Stick kind of event, I said, yeah, I'm totally happy to do that, but I really hope you don't intend for me to speak softly, because that's not why people bring me. So we're going to have a great discussion for the next hour and a half about a really important topic that's very dynamic, that is in the news a lot, but that, quite frankly, I don't think is really understood by the people that matter, and that's you. And so I can't think of better people to have this conversation with from a policy perspective, from a funding and acquisition perspective, and from an appropriations perspective. But before we get started on this, and as a former staffer who used to have the Warheads on Foreheads portfolio, which is what I used to call it, it was the best portfolio, by the way. I'm just going to turn it over to the gentleman to have some opening remarks. So, Senator Hoeven, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Kevin, thanks for hosting this first of your series, Talk Softly, Carry a Big Stick. Great idea. I mean, when you mentioned it to me on the Senate floor, I thought, yeah, what a great idea to celebrate this amazing place. Robbie Loff, could we just have a round of applause for Robbie Loff? And I mean, my God. So he tells me the story of how he goes in to see, he was on Doug Burgum's staff when Doug was governor, and he goes in and he explains this idea to him. And like Kevin and I were talking just outside here, Doug every once in a while has a really good idea. And he decided to support Robbie in this effort. And my gosh, 72,000 visitors in 6 weeks. 72,000 visitors so far. I mean, that just tells you the incredible national interest in this amazing facility. And this is a great example, of somebody having good ideas. Kevin having the good idea now to set up this speaker series, which is going to be successful. I mean, when you start out with General Guetlein, thank you so much for being here, and Golden Dome, something that's really of international importance, that tells you the potential for this series and, of course, this great spot. Because who in the world's going to get invited and not want to come, Robbie? It's that awesome. Kevin and I work together, Kevin, of course, on all things. And I couldn't have a better partner in the Senate. And other senators remark on that as well. And kind of envy it, frankly. So I certainly never take it for granted and appreciate it very much. He's on the Armed Services Committee authorizing side. I'm on appropriations, so I'm on defense appropriations. We fund things. Another great example of how we work on issues together and important issues. And, the only other thing I'll mention as an opener is what an appropriate first session to have in this series. Think about North Dakota. You've got Minot Air Force Base. It is the only dual nuclear base in the country. So we have two legs of the triad. We're the only base that has two legs of the nuclear triad, right? And the de facto Golden Dome right now is our nuclear deterrent. That is the de facto Golden Dome. That's why nobody ever is going to ultimately take us on, is because we have nuclear capabilities beyond anyone else's in the world. And that is de facto the Golden Dome that has served us very well for many, many years since World War II. Minot has, like I say, a big, big part of that deterrent. Now, going forward, Grand Forks Air Force Base is going to have a very important role to play in the deterrent that we're adding going forward to our nuclear triad, and that's Golden Dome. So our state has a big dog in this fight. And again, I think it shows how good ideas work. In so many ways, it's a really great idea to do this series. I commend you for it, and I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. Senators, thank you for hosting this, Robbie. Amazing facility. Thanks for taking the time to show it to us this morning and hosting this event. And I'm honored to be the first one of these events that you've hosted. And I think it's pretty telling of just how critical this discussion is. We as a nation for generations have relied on our oceans to keep us safe from harm overseas. And while we have been occupied fights, away games, if you will, our adversaries have become very intent on holding the homeland at risk, and worse yet, very capable at doing that. And unfortunately, because we were relying on that triad that Senator Hoeven talked about and mutually assured destruction, we were relying on our nuclear forces to keep us safe from those threats here on the homeland, and have left the homeland relatively undefended. And what the president has asked us to do is to rapidly change the homeland defense equation in our favor to deter aggressive acts against our homeland, and if necessary, defeat those aggressive acts. And it gets equated a lot in the public about nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. But the threats to the homeland are much greater than the nuclear weapons that we all grew up in. And all you have to do is watch what's going on television in places like Iran and the Middle East and Ukraine to understand how the weapons on the battlefield have rapidly changed over the past couple decades. And unfortunately, those weapons are now able to reach out and touch our homeland. And the way we have architected our national defense gives me two response options. I either invade your territory or I launch nuclear weapons at you. That's the only two options that we have right now. Defending our territory on our own turf is really not in our realm of capability today, and that is what the president has asked us to rapidly change. And we're going to explore that, and there's a lot to unpack there that I hope that we can kind of get to. But what is more critical is that we actually have national level discussions like this in a forum like this, and actually have dialogue to understand what we're doing, why we're trying to do it, and why it is so critical that we get after this threat. So Senators, I greatly appreciate you both hosting us, and Robbie, and you could not have picked a better moderator than Sarah Monero, a longtime friend of mine, and she does call balls and she does call strikes. So it should be an interesting discussion this morning.
Do you call it a strike if it's over the black of the as opposed to the white of the plate? Anyway, I'm sorry.
Do you want to make any?
I'm good. I've
good to
said
go?
my piece. I'm just so grateful to have these two guys and to have you here with me.
No, it's going to be fantastic. So we started with the recognition that it's been about a year and a half since President Trump signed the executive order. General Guetlein, while you're taking your first sip of water, what has happened since then? Where have we gone? What kind of progress have we made so far?
We've made tremendous progress. So yeah, you say a year and a half. Well, let's put that year and a half in context. January of last year, the president rolled out the Iron Dome for America Act, which was later renamed Golden Dome for America Act. But it was not until July of last year that they actually put in place the Golden Dome Program Office, and I was confirmed, and I was allowed to start going. July of last year. So we're only looking at 12 months.
Okay.
We've had 12 months of runway, and by the way, we did not receive any funding to get after this until March of this year. So really, everything I'm getting ready to tell you has been since March of this year. Congress gave us $22.5 billion for this year under reconciliation. That is a significant amount of national treasure. As a result, at the foundation of everything we've done in Golden Dome, we've architected two fundamentals. One is economics and one is affordability. We cannot protect this nation and bankrupt it at the same time. So we've got to figure out how to do this economically. So of that $22.5 billion, we've already obligated about 90% of it. We're kind of leading the department in our ability to get things on contract. We have radars on contract. We have space-based interceptors on contract. We have interceptors on contract. We have sites on contract, and have really moved out significantly in acquiring the capabilities that we believe the nation's going to need to defend itself going forward against a wide variety of threats, of which the president has defined, first and foremost, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles that we all grew up with that are nuclear capable, but also conventionally capable. They don't have to have a nuclear weapon on it, and our adversaries have been making sure of that. The next one that we're really worried about is ballistic missiles from the sea and ballistic missiles from the air. The adversary has gotten very good at building quiet submarines that can sneak up on our shores and building airplanes that can navigate around our radars to sneak up on us. We need to be able to defend against ballistic missiles launched from sea and ballistic missiles launched from air. Then we start getting into counter unmanned aerial systems that you see on TV every day. We don't have a lot of defense against those. We traditionally didn't think that they could reach us. But as you saw with Spiderweb in Ukraine, you can put these things in a shipping container, put them on a ship, pull up in one of our harbors and surprise us. So we're getting after the group 3, 4, and 5, which are the larger UASs, not the ones you buy at Walmart, but the much bigger ones. Now, the last set of threats, or the ones that really keep us awake at night, are the next generation of threats. That starts off with cruise missiles that can come in very, very low, very, very fast and around our radars. But then there's hypersonics. Hypersonics that can maneuver, and they travel in excess of 10 times the speed of sound. Think about how fast that is. 10 times 500 to 600 miles an hour. 6,000 miles an hour is how fast these things are traveling. They can launch it on the other side of the globe and be here in a matter of hours. That's a huge challenge. Then the last one is what we call fractional on-orbit bombardment system. FOBs, got a really kind of fun, unique name. But the bad thing is it looks like a space launch. It looks like they're trying to put a satellite in orbit. It goes around the Earth, and they can re-enter that object any point in time that they want and maneuver into their target. Those are the class of threats that we are getting after. So that kit that we put on contract, all those contracts, is to get after that wide variety of threat. Then we took what we believe is our architecture and took real hardware into a test about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And out of that test, we shot down everything that we put in the air in a matter of 34 minutes. Can't talk more about that, about what kit we used and what targets we went against, but we proved that the capabilities that we are buying with that $22.5 billion that Congress gave us are going to absolutely be effective against the threat. And what we have been able to accomplish in that short amount of time is a program that will deliver defense of the homeland in the summer of 2028 against what we believe are going to be the relevant threats in 2028 to give us that deterrent and that defeat capability.
I mean, it sounds like a tremendous amount of progress in 12 months. You know, I see some people in uniforms here. I'm going to assume that if you're here, you're a nerd. With just different flavors of nerds, right? So, and that's okay. But for a Department of War program to go from conceptualization to acquisition to test in 12 months is almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. Then to be targeting fielding by 28 is breakneck speed, quite frankly, for the department. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I'm really interested because one of the great things about General Guetlein is not just the philosophy that he brings to acquisition, but how he brings all of us into his orbit. I'll use a lot of space analogies here because I'm a space nerd. But also, once you're in the gravitational pull of his orbit, you're just going to keep on coming back. And so he's made efficiency not just in the acquisition and the programs and the architecture that he's pursuing, but also in the amount of resources and people that he has. And you heard him just talk about that. How big is your office? How many people are you doing?
We are about 70-ish people right now. But what we know as a reality is that we are not going to build this capability, deploy this capability, and operate this capability by ourselves. Mm-hmm. It requires a whole of government and the whole of society to get after these threats, similar to what we saw during World War II. So our partnerships start with the two senators here, and the act that you got published, Senator Kramer, on Golden Dome for America Act, and we've built partnerships from the Hill to the White House to every single one of the services, to the agencies, to industry, and we are now starting to venture out beyond that, because none of us can go it alone. There is not one single industry partner that can build what we need alone. There is not one single service that can fight this fight alone. It's going to take all of us operating together. So really what we have done, and what you're kind of referring to, Sarah, is we've built a community that is dedicated to protecting and defending this nation, that understands the criticality of the threat and feels that sense of urgency. And that is really what has propelled us forward.
Senator Kramer, do you have a response?
Well, could I take over? Because I want to
Please.
ask you a question.
Okay.
That
was not in the contract, y'all.
I know, but you're the smartest
Giddy up.
person next to me, next to him. So, because what you asked him and what he's speaking about, and you referenced industry just now, and that's why I kind of wanted to get back to you a little bit, because Sarah was also a venture cap. She's been in every aspect: executive, legislative, venture capital. Worked for Anduril, advised Palmer Luckey on space operations possibilities before anybody thought it was possible. Maybe speak to what he just talked about from that. How do you efficiently get industry involved when you don't have all that much to pay them? And what role, if any, does the 5-year procurement piece that we did on the overall NDAA last year fit into that? And I didn't run any of this by them before this started, so you know.
Giddy up. So a couple of things to think about here. I mean, the first is that General Guetlein can talk about his own architecture, and I'll let him do that. But inherently, what we're talking about from a technological point of view is pretty much already out there. There's not a tremendous amount of innovation other than scale, efficiency, production speed, integration, all of the very not glamorous things that actually require a system to work, right? And so I joked when General Guetlein, one of the first texts that I sent General Guetlein after he got announced as being the direct report program manager for Golden Dome was, "Congratulations and condolences."
Yeah.
And I said, "You've been field demoted from a vice chief of space operations to a program manager," which if you've ever worked in the 5-sided puzzle palace, you realize that That's an incongruity. And I think they gave him that opportunity, I'll be honest, because one of the real opportunities of Golden Dome is not only to protect people in our homeland, but it is actually to implement the acquisition reform in a broader sense for the Department of War, and that Secretary Hegseth is trying to implement. And if you have followed General Guetlein's career, this is actually the culmination of a theory of acquisition that he has promulgated for years, which is exploit what you have,
Buy what you can.
buy what you can, and build only what you must. And the reality is that there is a tremendous amount of incentive and innovation. It is something that makes America great, right? The commercial aspects and the entrepreneurs that are incentivized to spend their own precious capital, their own resources in the broader defense ecosystem are tremendously incentivized by doing so, not just, for money, but also for the broader public service and for the broader defense. And so it's been fascinating to see General Guetlein be able to actually be kind of unleashed in being able to implement his own acquisition reform and, quite frankly, watch the Department of War kind of catch up with that. And so from an industry point of view, what industry is always looking for are signals, right? Whether those are policy signals, whether they are contractual signals, whether they are we actually going to fund the program, and appropriations signals. And I think this is an opportunity for Golden Dome and for the nation to really understand not only the layering of capabilities, but the layering of different parts of the economy, the layering of the different parts of the government, and how all of that better serves basically to provide security that we all take for granted. We take for granted to the point where we don't even assume that there's a threat, or we question the threat, and to be able to do that in a holistic way.
Well said.
Yeah, so one of Senator, one of the theories that we have, a fact of life, is that the government doesn't innovate. It's not a surprise to anybody. We don't create anything. We ask for things. And we have built a culture for generations of acquirers, and those acquirers are not just program managers or engineers or policy people, they're budgeteers, or the list goes on. That culture was not to have transparent conversations because we were afraid we're going to divulge something we probably shouldn't divulge, create an unfair competitive advantage over one provider over another, and a whole lot of other reasons. So as a result, we got a very stagnant, very lethargic acquisition system. And the system is end-to-end, from the Hill all the way to industry. And if you go back in the history books, a lot of which are right across here in the library, and look at, hey, what did we do in standing this nation up? What did we do in the Spanish War? What did we do in World War I, World War II? What did we do Korea, Vietnam, and even as recently as the Middle East? We relied on industry and our allied partners. And in order to get after the threats that are coming after us right this second, we're going to have to do the exact same thing. Rely on industry and rely on the allied partners. And under Secretary Hegseth's arsenal of freedom, that's exactly what he's trying to do, is change the culture across the entire department to start operating as a team. The only way I'm going to get innovation and get product out into the field is by having a transparent conversation with our industry providers and those on the Hill that have to fund it. Once you can start having transparent conversations, people start to line up, you start to get unity of effort. And unity of effort is a beautiful thing because you no longer have to be in charge. It just starts to come together as we saw in the past histories of the United States. So what we're trying to do under Golden Dome is have as many transparent conversations with the industry as we possibly can, with as many providers. I have personally met, in the 1 year that I've been in this job, over 500 companies one-on-one to hear what can they bring to the table. And the capabilities that we are investing in are not traditional primes per se. There are some traditional primes in there, but a whole lot of new startups, a whole lot of new entrants, because that's where the innovation's coming. And that innovation are things like advanced processing, artificial intelligence, mesh communications, cyber hardening, cyber defense, cyber resiliency, infrastructure resiliency, some of the things we traditionally haven't discussed. But I believe, and what we are showing, is that if you can get everybody headed the same direction, it'll all start to come together because we all start to understand the problem that we're trying to get after. And that problem is prolific. That problem is not fictitious. That problem is dangerous. It is putting us at risk. It's putting our populations at risk. And I have 4 daughters, and I worry about their future. So I am just as motivated as all those industry partners, Senator, to get after this threat.
Senator Kramer, I'm going to throw this back at you now, because tit for tat.
I want to ask another question.
What?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No.
It's your turn.
You mentioned in your opening comments, and General Guetlein has reiterated the importance of partners and alliances. I mean, people online and people in the swampland of DC may not realize it, but we're less than 250 miles away from the border of Canada. Also, on the Canadian side of the border, 90% of their population lives within 250 miles of the United States border. Clearly, Golden Dome for America is named Golden Dome for America, but what are your perspectives on the broader implications for Canada, for partners and allies, for things like this?
And the general has been using the term allies, and I'm 100% there. What's going on in Canada, and the statistics you reiterate, is why I spend so much of my energy specifically on the U.S.-Canada relationship. It's why Mark Carney calls occasionally. It's why the ambassador has me to the House a lot. It's why the trade minister comes into my office on his way to the Oval Office. It's a critical relationship for lots of reasons. However, in the context of Golden Dome, it's like you don't protect North Dakota by simply protecting yourself against Manitoba, right? I mean, we still get along pretty well, and so anything coming over the Arctic, which has in my mind has always been an important domain, but it's become a critical domain, just as it once was. It is again times 10, and so I actually think that Golden Dome is one of the ties that binds us strongest of all of those in terms of that diplomatic relationship. The first thing I told Prime Minister Carney about 2 weeks after he was elected, well, it was about the week after he came to see the president, was I hope you're prepared to invest heavily in Golden Dome, because if you do that, you're respecting our shared border that others will not. And I've seen a lot of movement there. I get over to the embassy occasionally to speak to national defense industries, most of which, by the way, are American industries with plants in Canada. In some cases, it's Canadian startup companies, and continuing that relationship to talk about ways to meld this all together. Again, you can't protect the United States from the north without protecting Canada. So we can't just leave it alone, but Canada has to play a bigger role in its own defense. What's encouraged me is that Mark Carney has done what he says he'd do, and that is get to 2% funding. He is on his way to 3.5% and committed to getting to 5% of their GDP. His predecessor of the same party, when I talked to him about where I tried to help him actually use some of their mineral assets and other things as leverage, if you will, to getting to that 2% number, was so uninterested as to almost be insulted that they would somehow use uranium as a contribution to national security, because they don't do that up there. So I actually see that relationship as, in some respects, being held together in these other rockier trade times by Golden Dome and other things. Obviously, NORAD, NORTHCOM. I think synchronizing and harmonizing weapon systems to include the F-35, if you're watching, Mr. Prime Minister, would be additional assistance. But I'm hopeful.
Okay. Senator Hoeven, a lot of the discussion about Golden Dome revolves around funding. I know.
I know you didn't think this was
A
going to come
lot
up.
of discussions involve around funding.
Yeah, right.
Right? It was funny. Last week, General Guetlein made a statement like, if there's no defense budget and there's no reconciliation, then there's no Golden Dome. And that got picked up by press everywhere. I mean, quite frankly, it's larger than a Golden Dome issue if there's no, budget, if there's no reconciliation as we work through these. The Senate's already passed a CR. There's no multi-mission long endurance, MQ-9 operations, right? Like there's no infrastructure, right? So how do you see the funding picture going forward at the end of this year? How do you think it will impact Golden Dome? I mean, the way that it was presented in the budget was interesting, was challenging.
She's talking softly now.
It's about as soft as I can talk. I mean, I have very strongly held personal opinions about it because I think it made everybody's life more challenging, right? It clearly identified priorities, but it also, the mechanisms in which you gentlemen have to work your magic created a lot of tension. And, the enemy doesn't have to worry about that. And so I would be interested in your perspectives just on defense funding for the next, couple of months as we close this out, as well as looking in the future for Golden Dome. There was a bunch of articles today also talking with, cost projections of Golden Dome and nuclear modernization and things.
Well, Sarah, you're showing your knowledge of the budget and the appropriation just in your question. On the good side, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we included $150 billion for the military. And as General Guetlein said, I had 25 billion, but hey, in DC, you said 22, 25, we work with big numbers.
Major minus,
Yeah. So Golden Dome got that funding, that 22 plus billion, and it depends how you allocate it, but we'll go with 22 if you want. The 90% of that you've probably already obligated, as you described, which shows how well you're moving out and how fast you're moving out. And it also demonstrates something else that Sarah said, where she's 100% right. It's not like he's creating a whole bunch of new systems. People think of Golden Dome, there's some new thing. No. He's amalgamating all these things. Think of Patriot missile batteries. Think of THAAD missile batteries. Think of all of our ABMs, our ballistic missile capability, our hypersonics, our Parks radars, all these things that we're using and have tremendous utility in and of each discrete system. He's pulling those together to create this layered system of protection. And it will be layered in a lot of ways. I mean, Sarah asked the question about Canada, and Kevin does do a ton of work with Canada. The idea that we're going to protect Canada first is not how this is going to roll out. I mean, there's a lot of aspects and phases to it. They're in the plan. But the point I'm making is when we look at the funding, we didn't just roll out $22 billion for new stuff that hadn't been invented yet that General Guetlein was going to somehow bring to fruition. These are all systems that we are using right now and have tremendous demand for, as you've seen, particularly with like Patriot missile batteries and munitions and that kind of stuff, which means you have to both tie the strategic funding that we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill and Reconciliation 1, and then you have to tie in our annual appropriations. Our annual appropriations last year and this year, it's about $890 billion. That's the baseline. In that baseline, he has $398 million.
Yeah, think of it.
He needs $17 billion. That's right. So Sarah just demonstrated to you the magnitude of the challenge in terms of the way this was put together. We fund that through three different ways. One is through the regular appropriations process. We just put that to rest as far as having a government shutdown pre-election by funding a continuing resolution with a large bipartisan vote that will take us to December 11th. That's at $890 billion. That covers that baseline of approximately $400 million that he will get. That's a far cry from the $17 billion he needs. That will come through either a supplemental package, which would require Democrats to vote with us, or it will come through Reconciliation 3, which we can pass with 51 votes. But there's a lot to that. And that's what I'm very committed to doing because I think that's our best chance. There's 3 things in it. One is the Save America Act. 2, some help for agriculture, which I've worked very hard with the White House to get, and is included in the supplemental as well. And 3rd is funding for him and all of our great men and women, including current operations in Iran and other places. We need to get that done. And we got to work out a larger number than we have right now in Recon 3. And Kevin, you may want to talk about that. And we're working with Ron Johnson, Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, who is our budget chair now that unfortunately our dear friend Lindsay passed on. He was our budget chair. And now it's Ron John. And so I'm very committed to working on Recon 3, the 3rd reconciliation package, and seeing if we can't get these priorities ironed out. And the other good thing about having Ron John in there is hopefully we can maybe find some funding offsets that would help make the package work. So that is a huge priority for us now and through the end of the year.
Aren't you glad he's on the Appropriations Committee? John just mentioned something really important, and it sort of dovetails a little bit with what you and the general were talking about. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is how many hundreds of billions of dollars Deputy Secretary Feinberg has found in savings in this process. So we've literally been able to do about $400 billion more stuff, valued stuff, than without finding any new money, just by working more closely with industry, providing 5 years of procurement contract, working with venture capital entities and companies and startups, and it sort of drives the big guys nuts sometimes. But it's everybody's competing for a new thing these days, and so there's all of that. I'm 100% with John with everything he just said. Frankly. We can't, if we end up with, say, $890 billion, $900 billion as the baseline going forward, all the more reason that the reconciliation number has to be even larger. And hopefully, post-election, the threats will be clearly understood. Things will shake out a little bit, and maybe we can get that number up. Because if we do reconciliation at the number that the House passed, all they really passed is the supplemental. The supplemental should be the low-hanging fruit, really. And we can't waste the reconciliation opportunity, in my view, by doing a low number. We have to plus up in a big way.
General Guetlein, I'm going to give you what every 4-star just dreams of. The opportunity to sit next to an authorizer and appropriator, not down at the dais having to, defend the PBR, but actually having a conversation with 2 gentlemen that are very committed and very effective at getting what they want about your program. I mean, how confident are you in all of these pathways going forward, the 3 pathways that Senator Hoeven talked about, and its ability for you to make a 2028 operational capability?
I'm an optimist at heart, and my wife tells me it all the time. But I believe we as a nation are going to figure it out. What it looks like will be some combination of those 3 levers that Senator Hoeven talked about. But the reason I'm optimistic that we are going to figure this out is because I believe that our decision makers at the highest levels understand the threats that are against us. They understand the odds that we're up against. They understand what it means to lose. And we're talking about PhD level budgeting here at the federal level. And we're talking about numbers that to the average American are astronomical. And it is a significant amount of national treasure. But if you look and put that into perspective, the Port of Los Angeles, relatively undefended. LA Basin has nearly 18 million people in the LA Basin. $1.5 trillion to our gross domestic product comes out of that port. During COVID, when it got shut down, we were losing $1 billion a day in national domestic product. $1 billion a day. So think about what the threat could do and how much that would impact us. Go back to look at how much we were impacted during COVID from a national economic standpoint. So the numbers we are talking about are astronomical, and they're hard to understand. But what is not hard to understand is just how vulnerable we are. And I believe our national decision makers understand that, and I believe that they're going to figure this out. So I'm fairly optimistic that we're going to figure this out, and the program is going to continue to deliver forward, and we were going to have changed the national defense equation in the summer of 2028, as we've promised.
Okay. I mean, it's great to have some optimism in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to take that.
I used to be an optimist, and then I became a senator.
Exactly, right? Yeah. I can see that. But out here, you know, the air is so much
Yeah, that's right.
When we came in earlier to see this venue, I proposed that we actually turn our chairs and just look out back because it's so beautiful out there. And what you can't tell online is the air out here is just fresher and crisper and cleaner, and you breathe better out here than you do in Washington, D.C., I will tell you.
There you go.
So just making a plug. The senators, both of the senators, have done a tremendous amount of work building and promoting the industrial base here, specifically when it comes to UAS and counter-UAS capabilities. You have a summit out here in October. You bring together industry and military kind of people in that. General Guetlein, you talked about how one of the capabilities responsible for Golden Dome is counter-UAS and those group 3, 4, and 5 kind of threats. Can you talk a little bit about how that's centered on Grand Forks, on North Dakota, and how it will be integrated into the larger kind of Golden Dome architecture and capability?
Yeah, so a lot of different angles there in your question. So I keep talking about partnerships, and I've mentioned a lot of the strong partnerships, but what I failed to mention is partnership with academia. That is really where the next generation ideas are coming out of, our younger generation, and they're getting excited about space, they're getting excited about STEM and all that. And I was out here last year up at Parks, as Senator Kramer talked about, and he introduced me to the University of North Dakota. And I was immediately struck by the level of advanced processing, artificial intelligence, and the UAS technologies that UND is partnering in. So one of the threats that we have to get after is counter UAS. Class Group 3 and above. These are the larger ones. Think small Cessna size and bigger that can be armed in a bunch of different ways, which really becomes a sensing problem. How do I sense the environment to understand what is a threat versus what is a private pilot flying across country versus something else? And it really comes down to sensing and advanced processing. And then once you figure out that it's a threat, then how do you counter that? And a lot of that forward level thinking is coming out of UND. And you've got the UAS conference coming, and Senator Hoeven invited me to come out and participate in that here in October. But what we stood up as part of Golden Dome is what we call the Apex ARC. It's a data ecosystem where we're going to bring all the data sources together and allow industry, academia, other government agencies to play with that data in a data exploitation sandbox or an artificial intelligence sandbox. And connected to that is the University of Partnership, of which UND is one of those partners, and we're going to talk to them about that after a little bit after this session this morning. But what I do believe is that where you started, Sarah, is that the technologies exist today. We just got to figure out how to harvest them together. A lot of those technologies are in academia. A lot of those technologies are aimed at counter-UAS because of what we're seeing overseas. And it is a threat that we've got to figure out as a nation how to both sense and defeat.
Senator Kramer, you've been a tremendous advocate of bringing more kind of command and control, space-based kinds of capabilities around. I will echo, UND is a great example of a partnership here. I will tell you, they actually have they employ one of my friends. One of my friends works for UND. He is a professor of space law because aliens are very litigious. No, because because there's actually a lot out there. But UND has a great program. But do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the commercial UAS kind of ecosystem that you're growing out here?
Sure. Well, several things there too. I'm gonna go back to John Hoeven though, because he was governor when he envisioned at a time when Grand Forks Air Force Base had been on the closed list a couple of times, and trying to find a lifeline there that would be sort of a bridge, if you will, to a future mission. So all things go back to John Hoeven, but he was working at that time with the delegation and the Air Force and others. And really, the Air Force has first enhanced use lease at the Grand Forks Air Force Base because of John's work. I get to hop in the middle of it, sort of parachute in as a freshman House member and start working with the communities. And we all sort of found our place to include attracting industry on the other side of the enhanced use. I call it the other side of the wall. Enhanced use lease piece, the Grand Sky, which their director is right here. Tom Sawyer is with us today. And immediately, two of the largest companies set up shop there because they have all the assets of an Air Force base without having all the sort of the baggage of an Air Force base, and a big bomber base at that. And so Northrop Grumman and General Atomics set up shop there, anchor tenants, and over time, that attracts more. And with a good university, with Grand Sky, with first of all an Air Force base that flies drones, if you will, RQ-4s, and the National Air Guard flies MQ-9s, you had an intellectual sort of foundation there, and a school that sets up the very first UAS four-year degree program. I mean, it's no wonder Donald Trump had the wisdom to ask a guy from North Dakota to set up a Space Force. Really, I knew about that much about it, but I had good resources. One of Kramer's convictions is you can either be really smart or really resourceful to be successful. So I lean heavily on resources, and so I have a lot of them here. But that is the ecosystem that first of all had to be created by an idea, and then fostered by encouragement. And by the way, there are a number of state legislators in the room. And in the early, right? Yeah. Well, he can't hardly count. He's a head cheerleader
Andy Burkhart,
for all things.
You know.
he's awesome. But Randy's one of the best. But anyway, there are a number of legislators here, and the reason I invited them, frankly, was so that they could hear that the investments that the state of North Dakota has made in places like, all of our universities, our military bases, Friends programs, Grand Sky. And that they've invested specifically in things like UAS and space pay off. Not just in a return on investment way, which they have, but in an outweighing, how do I say this? In a way that just demonstrates one more time how North Dakota punches way above its weight class. Because we've sensed the obligation we have to the security of this nation, where our members, our people, our citizens sign up at about 4 times the national rate. You mentioned the five indigenous nations, our tribes. I was just up at MHA yesterday, being reminded of all the Marines, including John's dad was a Marine, including the chairman who's not running for re-election. And it's so rich to be part of this environment and this climate in North Dakota. And so the ecosystem has since then sort of taken off. And we just sort of encourage it along, occasionally with some appropriations, occasionally with some ideas. But most importantly, the one thing I do the best probably is introduce my friends to my friends. And when you introduce friends to friends, and then you just get to step back and watch the magic happen. And so that's my best description of the ecosystem, is that I've been blessed. Literally, when the White House asked me if I would lead the charge on Space Force, because not a single other person was interested, I said, well, I'm a baby freshman senator on the Armed Services Committee. I do have the aerospace school at the University of North Dakota and a Space Command, old radar that could tip over any time probably. But okay, what the hell? And so that's really all I knew is I had good resources.
Love it. Yeah. We appreciated that so much. let's get a little nerdy.
Oh, gosh.
Come on, you love it. You wouldn't ask me here if you didn't want to get a little nerdy. One of the big comparisons that people always make to Golden Dome is Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. I, as a very young child, got to help. I was in a Girl Scout troop that got to open the Reagan Library in Simi Valley. So I got to meet the Reagans. They were delightful. But they are different. They're different, probably definitely programmatically, but architecturally. The one thing that probably hasn't changed between Reagan's SDI and now is physics. Physics is probably pretty stable. But General Guetlein, recognizing that, can you kind of unpack that a little bit? What are the differences that we're seeing here in kind of Reagan Strategic Defense Initiative and what we're doing with Golden Dome today?
I think the biggest one's economics. It started with launch. When I first started launching rockets, you could pay excess of $500 million per satellite to put it on orbit. We're, depending on the size of the satellite now, we're definitely sub 100 million, sub 50 million in many cases. Those economics alone have allowed us to reach out and do things that we never could do before because we just could not afford it under SDI. When you look at the sheer power in your cell phone processing that has changed over the last 20 years, think about how much that has changed, that advanced processing, that miniaturization of that hardware. We didn't have cell phones during the SDI days. Think about that. Yeah. That technology has just leaped forward. So when you combine where we have progressed technology, where we have progressed the economics and affordability of the access to space and to technology, and you combine that with the sheer amount of innovation coming out of industry today, we can absolutely do this. We have a different set of challenges than what we had during the SDI days. The physics are the exact same. I agree with Sarah. The physics have not changed. Our understanding of the physics is a little bit better, but really has fundamentally not changed. It's the economics, the affordability, the innovation coming out of industry that has really propelled us forward.
You can't come to North Dakota, where Senator Hoeven has already mentioned, you've got 2 out of the 3 legs of the nuclear triad sitting here, and not talk about strategic deterrence. It's one of our favorite topics. It can almost get religious in Washington, D.C. when you start talking about various deterrence calculuses and, all of this. But at the end of the day, North Dakota's largest industries are oil and gas, and agriculture, right? So let's bring this all around. How is Golden Dome changing the strategic deterrence calculus? How does it matter to somebody who's working, and why should it matter to somebody who's working in an oil field or a wheat farmer or a student here in UND? So those are 2. That's a lot. That's a lot in one question. But you've got a big juicy brain, dude. I'm pretty sure you can handle this.
Big juicy brain. That's going to be the quote.
At least half right.
So I've spent most of at least half my career in the strategic arena. And for those that are not familiar with the word strategic means nuclear. It's just our way of saying, hey, nuclear attack, nuclear deterrence, strategic attack, strategic deterrence, which is where Golden Dome really kind of gets the biggest voice. Because there are those that believe that I'm going to replace the triad. That's why we're building Golden Domes to replace the triad. Therefore, Golden Dome is going to replace and become the foundation for strategic deterrence. That is not the case. We also have conventional threats that I need to get after. Golden Dome's job is to defend the homeland at home, to include Alaska, Hawaii, and our territories at home, not to reach out and touch the adversary. Our nuclear triad is meant to reach out and touch the adversary. It is more an offensive response to an attack than it is defense. But how do we defend ourselves while we were responding with the triad? And that's really what Golden Dome gets after. But I also have the conventional side, so I don't just have the nuclear. So I have both sides. So Golden Dome is there to support and to prop up the nuclear triad, to put additional doubt in the adversary's mind so that they know they will not win, and to buy time for our national decision makers to understand what is happening and to determine what is the best response going forward by defending the nation first and then responding second.
Great. You know, if I could expound on that, this is kind of right in our wheelhouse in North Dakota. And much why ISR is so important is so that people like John and me and his boss can have good information. But this deterrence question, and it's sort of what I was trying to get at when the triad as it exists with intercontinental ballistic missiles and launch from planes and of course the subs, all of that is based on the belief that rational leaders with other leaders with nuclear weapons would never want to participate in mutual destruction. I don't think we can count on that anymore because it's not just rational actors anymore that have access, whether it's going to be a nuclear weapon or a conventional weapon, certainly ballistic missiles. And we're fighting right now over some of that. So I think it becomes part of the deterrent to be able to demonstrate it's going to cost you a lot to get to us, even before we would respond.
First, we're going to defeat it. Second, we're going to respond.
That's right. And so, but then at the same time, there are those, and the greatest demand signal here really are our adversaries who are claiming that doing this is actually escalating, which is nonsense. That's their admission, frankly, that they can't keep up if we do this. And I think it's de-escalating, absolutely. I think it's the best deterrent combined with the current one.
So Senator, I agree. And there is no really book definition of strategic stability. But there are those that are trying to say Golden Dome is going to be destabilizing. I will argue, and I'm not a policy expert, and I'm not a strategic deterrence expert, but to have strategic stability in the world, you have to have two things, two fundamental things, I believe. A stable stockpile of nuclear weapons worldwide and nobody in the entire world threatening to use nuclear weapons. China, Russia, North Korea modernizing their nuclear weapons. Iran, you've seen what's going on the news there, whether you believe they've got one or not yet or what, but they're pursuing it. So I do not have anybody not threatening to use them or nobody not threatening or nobody expanding their nuclear stockpile. If you don't have strategic stability today, what are you going to do? Rational actor says, like the senator said, if they're going to throw nuclear weapons at me, I'm going to respond in kind. It's not very productive. It doesn't do a lot for defense, but hopefully it deters bad actor activity best it can. You have to be able to defend yourselves. And for us to step back and say somehow by defending ourselves, we're going to be escalatory does not make sense in the world that we live in today, as you see every day on television in Europe and the Middle East.
Let's not end on a depressing note because that's real rough. That's a real Washington, D.C. thing to do, is just scare everybody and then drop the mic and walk away. So we're not going to do that in North Dakota, y'all. We're not. Let's talk about a couple of things, and then I think we wanted to have time to have audience participation and questions as well, so we'll try to accommodate that if we can.
Our tag gets the first one if he has one. So be thinking, yeah.
No pressure, though. Don't worry about it. What is, and this is kind of for all of you, because everybody up here on the panel has a different perspective, but gets this in Washington, D.C., I'm sure, all the time. What's the biggest myth about Golden Dome that you have to dispel? We'll just go down the line. Senator Kramer.
Yeah, I would start with kind of what John emphasized earlier, and that is that it requires a whole bunch of new stuff. That really we have a lot of, quote, stuff, but it needs to communicate in a more cohesive way. It needs to be more interconnected. And the first job that General Guetlein had to do was sort of inventory all of that in his mind or literally across all the forces, across all of the commands, and say, okay, what do we have? And then connect. So I would say that's probably the biggest myth. And then another one sort of shows up when you look at the different calculations of what it's going to cost. You see vast, caverns of information related to the cost between OMB, for example, and the Department of War, because they're presuming a lot of new stuff versus the general's ability to tie legacy. So I think it's the relationship between legacy and new and venture that is probably not as clearly understood, and probably is one of the bigger myths.
General Guetlein?
I think there's two big myths. One is the cost. There's some sensational cost estimates out there, as the senator was talking about. They're all false. They're not estimating what we're building. And most of them take a cookie cutter approach to taking kit that we deploy overseas, multiplying it by the size of the United States and saying that must be it. For example, defense of Guam is about $8 billion to defend Guam. Guam's 1/300th the size of the US. Take 300 times 8, you get a very large astronomical number that looks really good in the press. That's not what we're building. The second one that is out there is that it goes back to the SDI, that we proved during SDI that technology doesn't work. No, we did not. We proved that technology does work during SDI. What we proved during the SDI was I could not scale it and do it affordable. The technology that I am pursuing under Golden Dome is not next generational. There will be some aspects that we're going to bring to bear, but to rapidly change the Homeland Defense equation is utilizing the kit that we already have in our arsenal, as Senator Oven said, integrating it, networking it in new and innovative ways, and then getting after the threat. The technology exists, and we are not going to bankrupt the nation.
Senator Hoven?
Yeah, well, two that I've already mentioned and that others have mentioned as well. And the first is that it's an amalgamation of systems that have real importance individually, and that we're using at a high level, and that we would be funding and developing anyway, both offensively and defensively. That's one, and Kevin described that very well. Second, the conversation we just had about the asymmetry. I mean, the nuclear triad was developed as mutually assured destruction at a time when you had the United States and the Soviet Union as the global powers. You didn't have the asymmetry that you have today with terrorism and the dispersal of various nation states as well as terrorist organizations and the threats that they pose, including cyber. And so people think of Golden Dome as this thing we're just going to put up there. It's not. It's really an evolution of all these systems that we're bringing together to protect against not only potentially ICBM type attack, but cyber attacks, hypersonics, a terrorist, all these things. Like he mentioned, the port. Think of all the different ways you could attack a port, not just from space, but from sea through terrorist activity, all those different kinds of things. So the perception is that it's just this big umbrella we're going to put down that's going to protect us from nuclear attacks. That's not it. Also, it's not going to all happen at once. It's a phased-in thing, and we will increasingly build it and build its coverage and all those kind of things. And then the other point I would make that I think people may not be thinking about is it's not like it just replaced the nuclear triad. We have a real funding challenge funding Golden Dome. We've talked about that. But we are making a major effort to update our nuclear triad. Sentinel, which we're very aware of here in North Dakota. And so you've got not only Sentinel, GBSD, ground-based strategic deterrent, LRSO, long-range standoff missiles, the next generation bombers. All of those things go into the upgrade of the submarines, next generation boomer submarines. So all of those things, again, we need them in their own individual capacity. We need them for the nuclear triad. Same thing with Golden Dome. So when you hear these numbers about funding, remember there's a redundancy in terms of discrete use of these different systems, offensively and defensively, as well as those protecting the homeland, be it through the nuclear triad or Golden Dome.
Like I said, I don't want to end this, or at least my portion, being all doom and gloom. And I mean, I do that at home to my children. I hope you guys are at your open house, by the way. I will check on that later. What is the one thing that you are most proud about having achieved in the past 12 months with relation to Golden Dome? General Guetlein.
Don't bet on this. Don't bet against this nation. We are proving every single day that we're going to pull this off and that this nation is going to come together to get after this threat. We proved it during the test. And when you look back in history, we have three competitive advantages as a nation, and those three competitive advantages are remaining strong. The first and foremost are our people, the free will of our people. All you got to do is look back at 9/12 and look at how this nation came together as one on 9/12 after that tragic events on 9/11. The second one is our allies. They were betting against our allies, but look at how we are operating as a team globally with our allies. They are fighting side by side with us. They are still there with us. Our adversaries don't have the same strong allies that we have. The last thing that we have that they don't have is our industrial base. Our industrial base has always been there by our side, coming to our rescue, and that's where the innovation is coming. That's where the energy is coming. All three of those competitive advantages are what going to keep this nation safe, and I would not bet against this nation going forward.
Let me just say that it was a distinct pleasure to be invited here to moderate this first kind of iteration of the Carry a Big Stick forum. I hope that none of the moderators that come after me speak softly. But if you ever need me to come back, I totally will. I will tell everybody here in the local audience and everybody that's watching online, these gentlemen up here, each one of them, it's not just a privilege for me to sit here because of their titles and their importance and all of that, because they all are. I have seen each one of these gentlemen and their personal dedication to the service and safety and security of this nation and the things that they have given up personally and professionally for them. You should be damn proud that you have them in Washington, D.C., which is a swamp-tastic, crazy place. I say that living in Washington, D.C. But every single one of these gentlemen go above and beyond to serve, not just in their 15-second sound bites, kind of, that they get in a hearing, but on a very personal level. And I hope that you guys see that. I see it. It's why I flew out here for 24 hours to do this. And I couldn't be more happy to do it. And I will definitely be bringing my family back out here. I think we've got about 5 minutes for questions. The first one, I guess, goes to the tag. So giddy up.
He's got a microphone right behind you. Oh. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's coming down.
Just because we got people online.
Yep.
Brigadier General Johnson, the Adjutant General here in North Dakota. I've got caveat 5 minutes, so I got to talk to CNGB about something. But we have succeeded in North Dakota on many fronts. One of them is counter-UAS and getting after some new technology. We have the Northern Plains Test Site, Grand Sky, our Guard, the Point Defense Battle Lab at Grand Forks. And in order to be successful, we've had to all come together, work through different things, and see where we can synergize. I see a lot of similarities in that with your situation. You're taking some existing, if you will, other people's cheese and turning it into something good with Golden Dome. What has been successful on the teamwork front?
Being absolute transparent with everybody that you're talking to, whether that be the Hill industry, our other government partners. Transparency is really the key, and then being willing to have those critical conversations. They're not going to always agree with you, but you need to understand each other going forward. And when you can figure out how to leverage the core competencies of all the different partners, you'll be orders of magnitude better off than you were independently.
I want to echo something and use this example. When he says he met with, how many individual companies were on one?
Over 500.
Over 500. That's not BS. And the reason I know it is Senator Sullivan and I, when we introduced the legislation, we started having industry days in the SCIF in the Senate. And so we had many companies, some of the big ones, they're here, some of the small ones that are here, and several that are not here. And we listened to them all. But after that, whether it was a venture capitalist, whether it was a Joe Lonsdale or a Palmer Luckey, or you name it, lots of satellite companies, every one of them he had met with one-on-one, and in half of the cases, they say, yeah, he came out to our plant. And I'm like, but that's Texas. Yeah. He got on his horse so fast, but it's that eyeball-to-eyeball commitment, which is hard to do these days. And the transparency with which he speaks, you just don't have time for BS. We don't have time. He's got to be operational by 2028 because I stood in the Oval Office when the president gave the charge, right? That's almost impossible. And yet it's going to happen. And so these leadership characteristics are what are really have I think made it possible. And I'll also tell you, and I've told him, and I remember saying to Jay Raymond many times when he was the first chief of space operations, started out at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. The new one, by the way, General Shesh is also a missileer from Grand Forks. 2 out of the first 3, not bad. You get a white sheet of paper and a new thing. Don't gravitate to what you learned. Create something new that the rest can follow. See, Sarah, mentioned the sort of the interesting promotion, demotion, whatever you might call what happened. He answers directly to the President of War, or for the Secretary of War, for a reason, because there are at least a few, chiefs, of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all of whom are protecting their service, understandably so. The Secretary needed one person who would cut through all of that and be able to, speak straight back and forth. Sir. You do it well.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, you went from the vice chief to a program manager, in my humble opinion, because you're the best damn one we have.
That's right. I agree.
Any other questions from the audience? Looks like there's one. There are microphones coming over.
We want to make sure everybody online can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for inviting us.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Representative Sue Ann Olson, District 8. I don't think you have to sell North Dakota on the importance of what the role we play in protecting the country. As I look at the midterms coming, I wonder if we have told this really cool story in a way that helps ensure that that we're not going to drop the ball too quickly. I think it was apparent that there was lots of catch-up that needed to be done, coming off the prior years, and I think it's a real reason why we have to carry this forward, and that means so the elections this fall will matter. So I don't know if you can speak to that, but I think it's a fabulous story, and even the Golden Dome doesn't give you the real picture of what you're doing as you've explained. So if you
let me first of all, thank you for acknowledging that. You're right on point. The general asked me last night, what is the purpose of this? What do you want to get out of this? And it's exactly what you're talking about. And that is to socialize this information, not just to the people in this room. I mean, you're just props, quite frankly. You're
He said it, not me. That was me.
I fill the room with really smart people so that all those people that are watching online, and believe me, there's industries watching online, industry trades are watching online. No doubt a whole bunch of LA, legislative affairs people in the Pentagon are watching online and going, oh no, God, what are they doing? But here, this is where our job, we have similar missions but different jobs. And I think you hit on a really important point. I'm telling you, a week into my Senate term, I had my first briefing in the SCIF as a member of the Armed Services Committee on hypersonics. Not ours, our enemies. And by the time it got to me to ask a question, I just said, well, if your goal was to scare the shit out of me, congratulations. Because I thought I was like, people need to know. People need to know the threat because we're asking the taxpayers to invest a great deal. And by the way, in the I shouldn't say only, in the highest, most legitimate priority of our Constitution, and that is to defend the country. But they deserve to know why it's necessary to do what we're doing and to ask for what we're asking. And you heard the general many times use the word need. He never said what I want. He talked about what we need. And so great point. It's an important political point. It's an important campaign point. And you ought to, whether you're campaigning or you're sizing up a candidate, make sure you know their position on national security and defense appropriations. Because right now, it's getting kind of funny out there. Even people who are generally hawks, I have several convictions. One of Kramer's convictions, I think I told you one earlier. One of them is never trust a senator running for president, because suddenly they have a different philosophy. You know, crazy, isn't it? But I think it's important to just always challenge them on this point, the most important point in my view.
With that, I think we have expired time.
Got one more?
But there's
Can
one
we
more.
squeeze-
Can
can
we
we
just have one more?
just squeeze-
One more.
can we
This is the last
squeeze
one.
one more?
But yeah, we're good.
Unless
Let's
it's a
do it.
bad question, then we're going right to
Yeah, then we're just
commercial break.
we're cutting off the feed. Sorry.
No. I'm glad you're all here and curious.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. So Senator Van Osteen from District 36. I appreciate this conversation because I kind of grew up in a nerdy household. Dairy Farm north of Bismarck is where I grew up, but in our house in the early 80s, we had a lot of magazines about this program called the SDI,
Yep.
Strategic Defense Initiative, and books about colonizing Mars. And so this is exciting times. I actually appreciate this and the connection between the SDI and the Golden Dome. Grew up learning about it at a young age, probably 10 years old. And so this is actually really exciting. And so I appreciate the invitation to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also appreciate your comment about transparency. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Good way to finish.
Thank you all. Wow.
Okay, I think that wraps it up.
But
Did I bring
thank
shame
you.
upon the
You
dojo?
you were everything I knew you are and more, as always. She really is one of the coolest people in Washington.
The competition isn't fierce, by the
it's
way.
not
It
great,
is
but
Washington. So that's not saying it's not objectively, I'm not objectively cool. I'm just relatively cool
She's pretty cool.
with the rest of the nerds.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, General. John, good job. Thank you.